We continue now at the top of Daf Pei Gimel Amud Beis in Meseches Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 83b. This is the beginning of the 8th parak of Bava Kamma, parak HaChovel. The Mishnah says, HaChovel b'chaveru, if somebody wounds his friend, Chayev olav mishum chamisha devarim, he has to pay. He's obligated to pay the 5 payments, and the 5 payments are benezek, betzar, beripoy, b'sheves, uboshas. He has to pay for damages, he has to pay for pain, he has to pay for the medical bills, he has to pay for the lost time at work, and he has to pay for the humiliation. And the Mishnah explains benezek ketzad when it comes to damages, how so? Simes eno katas yado, shiberes raglo, if he blinds him in the eye, if he cuts off his hand, if he breaks his leg. Rono so ki'iluhu eved nimkar b'shuk, we view the person who was injured as if he was a slave being sold at the marketplace. V'shaman, and we evaluate Kamma hoya yafe, what was he worth? V'Kamma hu yafen, what is he worth now? That's how we evaluate the damages. And the Mishnah continues, tsar, when it comes to pain, kivo b'shvud o b'masmor, if he burns him with a spit, or let's say he injures him with a nail, va'afilu al tziporno, even if it's on his fingernail, makom she'eno osa chabura, let's say it's a place where there's no wound, omdin kama adam kayotze bazeh rotzalitol lios mitztar kach. We evaluate how much would a person want to take to have this kind of pain. Ripoy, when it comes to medical bills, hiko chayiv l'raposo, if he hits him, he has to pay for his bills, he has to pay for the medical healing. All about smachim, if there are sores that develop, imachmas hamak, if they develop because of the wound, chayiv, so he's obligated to pay for that, for the healing as well. Shalom machmas hamak, but if it's not because of the original wound, so pater, for that he is exempt. Chaysa v'nistra, chayiv l'raposo, again, let's say it gets better, and then gets worse, gets better, gets worse, he's chayiv to heal him. Chaysa called sarcha, but if it completely heals, so then if something happens after it totally heals, eno chayiv l'raposo, he's no longer obligated to pay for his healing. And the Mishnah continues, Sheves, when it comes to paying for the lost work, Roano so ki'iluhu shomer kishuin, we view him as if he's somebody that's watching cucumbers, a low-paid job that he could do even injured, Shekvar nasan lo d'mei yado d'mei raglo, because he's already paid him the value of his hand and the value of his foot. And finally, the Mishnah says, Boshas, when it comes to humiliation, hakol lefi hamevayish v'hamisbayish. Everything goes by the person who is causing the humiliation and going by the person receiving. In other words, those values can change. And Rashi explains, Hakol lefi hamevayish adam kal shebiyesh boshto meruba. If it's somebody who's lowly who embarrasses somebody, that's actually a greater embarrassment. V'hamisbayish, and then it goes by the person being embarrassed. Adam chashav shenisbayish. If it's an important person who is embarrassed, boshto meruba, that's a large amount of embarrassment. And Rashi notes, V'kulu chamisha devarim mikra nafki. All of these 5 payments we learn from the pasuk. Nezek tichsiv ayin tachas ayin. Nezek we learn from the pasuk that says ayin tachas ayin. Tsar is petza tachas potza. Dahachi darshinim begemara. Tsar is learned from the pasuk of Petza Tachas Potza as the Gemara darshans. Ripoy v'Sheves is a pasuk rag shifto yitain v'rapo yirape. It's an explicit pasuk about Ripoy and Sheves. And finally, Bosha's humiliation, Dechsiv, as it's written, v'Katsosa es kappa, you cut off her hand. That's talking about a woman who embarrasses somebody, mammon, and we understand that to mean a payment of mammon, a payment of money. And the Gemara says, Amai, why is this the case? Ayin tachas ayin amar achmana. The pasuk says an eye for an eye. Ema ayin mamish. Let's say that it really means you have to take out the person who does the damage. You have to take out his eye. Why is it that we assume that he pays money? And the Gemara says, Lo saka daitach, don't think that is the case. The Tanya, as we learned in a Braisa, Yachol simes eno, mesame es eno, I might think that somebody who blinds somebody else, so we blind him. Kitas yodam ekateas yodav, if he cuts off somebody's hand, we cut off his hand. Shiberes raglam, shaberes raglam, if he breaks someone's foot, so we break his foot. Talmud lomar, make adam make behema. The pasuk says, one who strikes a man and one who strikes an animal, we compare the two. Ma make behema l'tashlum, and just like somebody who strikes an animal, the payment is done in money. Af make adam l'tashlum, and so too, it's a payment of money when it comes to striking a person. Now, if you're going to say this is not a good proof, this comparison, make adam and make behema, harehu omer, there's another pasuk. Behold, it says in the pasuk, lo sichu kofer lenefesh rotzeach asher hu rasha lamus. It says that if somebody's a murderer, so you have to give him the death penalty. You can't take kofer. You can't take a ransom payment. He can't get out of it by paying. And we understand that to mean lenefesh rotzeach yatol lokeach kofer. If somebody's a murderer, so we don't take money. Aval atol lokeach kofer l'rasha yivarim shein chosen. But if somebody injures somebody, he injures a limb that's not going to heal, you are able to take kofer, meaning there is a money payment in those situations. And the Gemara continues, Hi Makkah. So we quoted this pasuk of Make Adam and Make Behema. Which pasuk specifically of Make are we referring to? Ilema Make Behema Yishalmena Umaka Adam Yumas. If you're going to say it's the pasuk which says that somebody who strikes an animal has to pay, and it says somebody who strikes a man, so he's going to die, Hahu Biktolaksiv. That pasuk has nothing to do with injury. That's actually talking about murder. It's talking about killing. Elamehacha, rather, comes from here, from the following pasuk, Make nefesh behema yishal meno nefesh tachas nefesh, talks about striking the animal in one pays. V'samachle, and then near that it says, V'ish kiyitein mum ba'amiso, kasher asa kenya yasa lo. If somebody injures, makes a mum in his friend, so what he does, that has to be done to him. And so the Gemara says, well, if that's the comparison, because those two psukim are near each other, but hai lav makahu, but it doesn't even say the word maka in that pasuk, it just says v'ish kiyitein mum ba'amiso. And the Gemara says, haka, and we just mean that it has to do, even though it's not exactly the same, but it has to do with striking somebody else. As Rashi explains, haka gamrinon, afagav dekroi lodam, even though the psukim are not similar, we're making here a gzeira shava in psukim, but they're not similar words, but gamrinon gzeira shava, we do learn a gzeira shava. Now, even though the Gemara said v'samuchle, that it's close by, it sounds like the Gemara is darshaning smuchim, two psukim that are close by. Rashi here is making it clear this is actually a gzeira shava, and even though the words are not similar, you can make a gzeira shava. Kedatan devei Rabbi Shmuel, as it was taught in the yeshiva of Rabbi Shmuel, v'shav hakohen uva hakohen, we make a gzeira shava there as well, even though the words are not similar. Umake adam dekatani hacha hakahu dekamra. When it says make adam, it just means haka. It just means something that obviously happened through striking the person. Umechiyita and mum gamar de mum al yedei hakaba, because a mum, a blemish, comes through haka, through striking someone, and that's what we mean. And so again, the Gemara says, Mahaka hamur bevehema l'tashlum, and just like the haka that's discussed by animal means payment, af haka hamur ba'adam l'tashlum, and so too the haka that's mentioned by people, it means payment. But the Gemara continues, V'achsib, but isn't it written, V'ish kiyake kol nefesh adam mos yumas? It says that if a person strikes another man, mos yumas, he will surely die. And as Rashi explains, V'achsib ish kiyake kol nefesh adam v'liktala lo asakra, this pasuk is not talking about killing, ela l'rasha evarim, it's talking again about damaging a person's limbs, k'nechsib basrei, because the pasuk it's written after, it goes on to say, ayin tachas ayin, an eye for an eye. Uchsiv yumas, when it says the word yumas over here, kilomer yinotel evara, what it means to say is you take away that person's limb who did the damage. V'yamas oso aver, that particular limb should die, but it seems to be that it's literally you take a limb for a limb. And the Gemara says to that, but mama, no, we're really talking again, we're talking about a monetary payment, not actually taking the limb. Mimai deva mama, the Gemara says, well, again, how do you know that it's money? Ema b'misa mamish, maybe it really means death. In this case, maybe it really means you do to the person the same that he did. And the Gemara says, lo saka daitach, don't let that enter your mind. Chada, number one, daha iskish lamake behema yishalmena. As we said, there's a comparison here to make behema yishalmena. When you strike an animal, there's a payment of money. V'yod, and further, ksib basrei, it says after that, kasher yitein mum ba'adam kain yinasin bo, it says that just like he made a blemish in the person, so too it should be given to him. The Gemara later will mention that given to him sounds like you're talking about something that you give to a person, a money payment. Ushma mina maman, and you see from this that we're talking about a monetary payment. But the Gemara continues, Umay im nafshach lomer. But why did it say above in the Brisa that if you're going to say that this is not a good proof, so then we'll give a proof from the pasuk of lo sichu kofer lenefesh rotzeach. And so the Gemara says to that, Sukkah kasha l'tana. So the Tana said it was bothering the Tana the following possible question: My chazas di'alaf mimake behema. Why is it that you should learn from striking an animal? Leilif mimake adam. We should learn instead from striking a person, meaning to say when you strike a person, you kill a person. So in that situation, there is a penalty that the person who commits the murder is put to death. So maybe we should learn from there the same idea that ayin tachas ayin is literal, an eye for an eye. And the Gemara says, Amri, they say to that, done in nizakin minizakin. We learn one case of damage from one case of damage. By the case of the animal, it's a situation of damage. Ve'ein done in nizakin mimisa. We're not going to learn damage from a case of death. So you're not going to learn a case where you injure a person from a case where you kill the person. But the Gemara says, Adrab, on the contrary, you can argue the opposite. Done in adam me adam, ve'ein done in adam me behema. Maybe we should learn a case of a person doing the damage from another case of a person doing the killing, as opposed to learning a case of a person from an animal. And the Gemara says, well, hainu dekatani. Well, that's exactly why it says, im nafshach lomar. That if you're going to say this isn't the greatest proof, there is an argument you could make. Maybe we should learn, it's possible we should learn adam me adam. And so to that we say, harei omer, the pasuk says, lo sichu kofer lenefesh rotzeach asher hu rasha lamus kimos yumas. Again, you don't take the ransom payment. We don't take kofer for a murderer. Rather, he is going to be put to death. And we understand that to mean lenefesh rotzeach. When it comes to a murderer, yatolokech kofer, one does not take the ransom payment. Avalatolokech kofer l'rasha ivarim she'ein chosin. However, there is a money payment that is collected if there's an injury to a limb, and that limb is not going to heal. And the Gemara continues, V'hai lo sichu kofer l'nefesh rotzeach l'mu'utei rasha ivarim hudasa. But is it really true that this pasuk of lo sichu kofer is to exclude injuries injuries that happen to limbs. Haimi boile, but isn't it needed for something else? It's needed for the following. To Amar Achmana, that the Torah is actually telling you, lo savid beitardi, that you shouldn't do to the person two punishments, meaning, lo sishkol minei mamon v'siktalei, don't collect money and also kill the person. Maybe the pasuk is just talking in the context of what we do with this murderer, and we're saying there are not two punishments. We only give the punishment of the death penalty. We don't also make the person pay money. And the Gemara says, no, that halacha, michdei rishaso nafka, that's already learned anyway from a different pasuk, the pasuk of kedei rishaso. We learn from kedei rishaso that you do according to the wicked, risha achas atamechayvo, meaning you're mechayev him, you obligate him for one wickedness, meaning to say there's just one punishment over here, the death penalty, via tamechayvo shtei rishayos, but you're not going to obligate him two rishayos, you're not going to give the two punishments. But the Gemara still continues, va'akatimi boile, but still we need the pasuk for something else, to Kamma Rachmana, because maybe what the pasuk is saying is as follows, lo sishkol mamon v'tiftere, that you shouldn't take money in order to exempt him. Maybe you would say that he could pay his way out of getting the death penalty, and that's what the pasuk is really focusing on. And the Gemara says, no, in Cain, if that were the case, if that's all it was teaching us, lichtov rachmana lo sichu kofer la'asher hu rasha lamas, then it could just say, don't take the ransom payment for the person who should be put to death. Lenefesh rotzeach lamali, what do we need to say for the soul of the murderer? Shma mina, so that extra phrase is coming to teach us, lenefesh rotzeach yata lokeach kofer, for again, the nefesh rotzeach, for the murderer we don't take the ransom payment, avalato lokeach kofer l'rashei varim she'en chosrim, but one does collect a ransom payment for injuries to limbs that will not heal. And the Gemara continues, but after it's already written lo sichu kofer, meaning if we're learning it from lo sichu kofer, make lamali. So what do we need the first limud that we were saying to learn it out from the case of make behema? We learn it out from an injury to an animal. What do you need that pasuk for? You already have the source from lo sichu kofer. And the Gemara says, Amri, the sages say to that, imei hai, if I had just that pasuk, have amina. So then I might have thought, iboy eno nesiv, v'iboy demei eno nesiv, that when it comes to paying for injuries, if he wants, he's able to give his eye. And if he wants, he can give the value of the eye. Maybe it can be one of the two punishments. Kamash mulan mi behema. So that's what we're learning from the pasuk of behema. Ma'amake behema l'tashlum. And just like by the injury to the animal, it's a payment. Af make adam l'tashlum. And so too by the injury of the person, it is going to be a payment. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Tanya, we learned in a brayso, Rav Dustoi ben Yehuda Omer. Rav Dustoi ben Yehuda says, ayin tachas ayin. Again, the pasuk says ayin tachas ayin. Mammon, that refers to a monetary payment. Ata Omer mammon oeno ela ayin mamish. You're saying it's a monetary payment. Maybe it means the actual eye. Amr, you can argue as follows. If this person's eye is large and this person's eye is small, hechani kore. So how can I call that? Hechani kore be ayin tachas ayin. How can I call that ayin tachas ayin? That's not an exact exchange. And if you're going to say kol ki hay shakal minei mamona, that in a situation like that where it's not an exact exchange, so then we actually would collect money, but that's not true either. HaTorah, Amr, the Torah says mishpat echad yelachem, it has to be one justice, one law. Mishpat hashava lekulchem, it has to be one law that's equal for everyone. You can't be you take some people's eye and sometimes you take money. But the Gemara still says, Amri, the sages responded to that, my kushi, what's the big difficulty if it's a large eye and a small eye? Dilma nahora shakal minei, nahora amar achman, and nishkal minei. Maybe you took away the person's ability to see, and so therefore his ability to see, the Torah says, should be taken away. Dilo temachin, if you're not going to say that, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Daled Amud Aleph.